Hey everybody, and welcome back to Ready, Steady, Play. It's time for another rules and setup video. I don't know why I don't start with the box on the table. You guys know what this is about. There's a thumbnail, there's a title. We're doing rules and setup for Mysthea, which is a territory control war game type deal from Tabula Games. And I'm going to show you what's in the box, then I'm going to show you how to set it up, then I'm going to talk you through how to play it, and teach you about the objectives and how to win it as well. So, as usual, all of the sections are in the video description below, and you can see what's going on with the text on the top of the screen somewhere. But first, just a little primer. Mysthea is for 2 to 5 players, and it probably takes a chunky 2 hours to play through. A bit less if you're playing with just 2 players. You see, Mysthea is a planet in space somewhere. The planet is called Icarion, and long ago, a mystical crystal smashed into the planet, and bits of the planet came off, but they were held in place by a mystical force. Somewhere there's a place called the Kingdom, and the Kingdom is full of guilds who don't like each other. And this is on the planet, right? So then the Kingdom and the guilds all want to go and explore these lands in the mists. And sort of over time, they develop technology to do that. And they also discover that people can control the crystals with their minds. Tabula Games have a bunch of other products that sort of expand this world and the different things that take place in the world. You can see their card game Volfirion, which we played the prototype of here on Ready Steady Play, but they've also just recently finished a Kickstarter campaign for their RPG, tabletop RPG, that allows you to play your own imaginative adventures in this world. But this one is their tabletop wargame. You will take on the role of one of the 5 guilds from Kingdom, and you will have a champion, and you will go down to the 5 mystical floating islands around the Hecacore crystal. The crystal that smashed into the planet. You're going to go down there and you're going to try and conquer it for your guild. The problem is you're going to have to fight off everybody else, and also the mysterious monsters that live on the islands. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open up the box and find out what's inside. So the first thing we've got here is this rulebook. Now here we've got 5 player boards. They're all in different colors. One for each of the guilds going to explore the floating islands around the Hecacore. Then we've got the 5 floating islands, which are here. And you can see here on the floating islands that they're double-sided. One side has just the image, and the other side has the iconography on it as well. So if you've learned all the iconography really well, you can play with this sort of more visual side here. And there are 5 of those. Cool. Then you've got this big one here. This is called the events board. And this is how we're going to be tracking the game length and other elements like that. You've got one big board here as well. This is the Hecacore board. There it is, the big crystal that smashed into the planet. Here are all the mysterious mists going on around the outside, and this is where the planets are going to go, and we're going to play the majority of the game. So we've got 2 trays of minis, and this first tray contains all of the monsters here along the top. Then you've got all your heroes here along the middle, and finally down here we've got 20 golems in 2 different sculpts. And golems are the stronger of the troops you'll play in the game. These are the other troops here. These are called troops. You should have one of these little wallets for each of the guilds in the game. You've got a bunch of command cards here as well. These are going to come in 4 different types. We've got starting ones with a star, and then the rest are divided up by era, because the game is going to take place over 3 eras. We've got 1, 2, and 3 era command cards there. More on those when we get to the gameplay. Here is a sample monster. I won't go through all 7 monsters, but I'll just show you really quickly a monster here. And here's a hero that's going to fight this monster. Of course, you can't really kill the monsters, but you can get lots of points for fighting them and being heroic. Here we've got the 2 different golem sculpts, and they're going to be going to war on your behalf. In this next tray, we've got is 40 troops, and the troops are all different sculpts. Well, there's 5 different sculpts, so you've got sets of 8. So you can either give one player So one player can have all the same sculpt, or because they're colored bases, you can each have a variety of sculpts as well. We've got a little baggie here. And this little baggie has just got some tokens and stuff in it. It's not actually used in the game at all, but these are called artifacts. They'll be used to determine who's going to be the first player and player order in the game. And we've got these here. These are for tracking victory points. If you make it around the victory point tracker once, you'll get 100, and then 200 if you make it around again. So there is a lot of points on offer. These Mirage tokens I'll talk about during setup. These are for a 2-player game only. And then I've put together these player bags here. In each player bag we've got bases. There's one little base for each of your 8 troops, and then there's 4 big bases for your golems and 1 big base for your hero as well. So you can track your hero there. And then we've also got in here these 4 of these fortress tokens here. These are going to be used when you build fortresses on the map, so they'll represent that. This is a little encounter token, more on what that does later. Each hero will also have this token here, which is used for tracking energy, the star, which is used for tracking experience, and this cube, which is used for tracking victory points. The 5-player colors are yellow, red, black, and purple. Now you've also got a whole bunch of cards here, full-size cards. First up, you've got 7 hero cards, 1 for each of the hero models. Then you've got 7 monster cards here, 1 for each of the 7 monsters. And it's important to note that the monster cards here have this orange back. We've also got, these are island attunement cards. There's 1 of these for each of the 5 islands in the game, and they are double-sided with a daytime and nighttime side. More on what happens with those in setup and gameplay. Then we've got this card here. This is called a storm card, and it also has that orange back, so take a note of that. And then here we've got these resource cards, and these each refer to the regions you'll find on the island. So these region cards here, for example, refer to these regions on this island. So this one has a mountain region, a crystal region, and a forest region. And here we've got the forest there. There's the mountain region and the crystal region. So take note that these also have the orange back, which means, you guessed it, these ones are all going to be going together later to form a deck. But for now, just keep them somewhere safe in the box. We've got these encounter cards, and this is actually the face up, so when you're making the deck of cards, you'll have them face up like this, and then when you encounter them, you'll be revealing them to find out what happens on the back. Last but not least, we've got these little player aids here, which give you all of the different actions you can do on a turn. One last thing before I move on to setup, we've got these. These are basically command card menu cards. These little guys here, this is all of them that are available in the game, and you're going to use this a lot. You're going to want to reference this a lot, so make sure that you keep this to hand. And with that, let's move into setup. So, what we're going to do now is set up Mysthea for play. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up our game board first. So we'll just unfold that, stick it right here in the middle of the table. Whoa, there we go. We can take our events board and set that up somewhere close by as well, like this. I can also put it like that, just depending on how your seating is arranged around the table. Here on Ready Steady Play, we all sit on my side, so this is the most sensible option for us. And we're going to take these floating islands here and we're going to try to set them up in a random order without looking at them. Am I hitting them? Am I getting them in the right place? That was pretty good. So, in a 2-player game, you also put out the 5 Mirage tokens. And what you're going to do is you're going to randomly put these Mirage tokens out on the 5 islands in the different regions. But make sure that you put 1 token per island and each one goes into a different region. There, I did it. Now that we've set those up randomly, we're going to do some monster cards. So we've got here our Storm card. These are our region cards here. We've got our Attunement cards here and our monster cards here. And what we're going to do is we're going to shuffle the monster cards and deal 3 face up to the 3 monster spaces here on the board. And you may have noticed the monster symbol here. And you'll notice as well that each one is associated with an era. You see, the game is going to be played over 3 eras. More on that in gameplay, but there will be 1 monster appearing in each era. Until all 3 are on the board at the same time, and it's hectic. Alright, so here we go. Monster 1, we've got Utkoro. Monster 2 is Kennebarok. Monster 3 is Bulron. Grr. Now that we've got our 3 cards laid out here, we're going to get our minis and just put them on the appropriate monster card. Then you can take your remaining monster cards and put them back in the box because you won't be needing them this game. Alright, now what we're going to do is we're just going to take our region cards here with the orange back and our storm card here with the orange back. We're going to shuffle these together. And for now, we're just going to put them face down at the start of the events track, which is right here. Then we're going to take these attunement cards, and the attunement cards have two sides. And so we've got a day side and a night side here. And what you can do is you can decide to play with them all on the day side, all of them on the night side, or just mix them up as you want. It's really up to you how you want to do it. There's no set arrangement. And then once you've decided, we're just going to set them in their places here. So this one is the volcano, so it goes there. Here we've got the crystal one. So make sure that you set them the right way up with the symbols at the bottom. There you have it. We've got here the encounter deck, so we're just going to give the encounter deck a shuffle. We'll throw that down here. Now we're going to do these command cards, and these command cards, I told you they were in 3 different types. So we've got the deck here with the diamonds, that's the starter deck, so we'll take that off the top here and put it to one side because we won't need that till later. Then you're going to take deck number 1, and we're going to place it onto the event board. And you guessed it, give the others a good shuffle, put deck number 2 here, and deck number 3 down here. Each player will start with a hand of command cards and a hero, and there are 2 ways to arrange this. The game suggests you can either give each player a random starting hand and a random champion, or you can play a mini drafting game. Now, if you want to do it randomly, you simply take a hero off the top of the deck and give it to a player. And when you deal them a starting hand, you take the cards by color. There are 4 colors in the game. There are red, blue, yellow, and green. And if you want to do it randomly, just shuffle the cards by color. Make sure each player gets one of the appropriate color so that they have 4 starting cards. If you want to do what they call the expert level, which is a draft, then you take all 5 decks, that is the 4 command card decks and the hero deck, champion deck, and you turn over a random champion along with a random one from each color of card. Then taking turns in player order, and we have not yet established player order, but after player order is established, taking turns, players will draft one of these cards, which will then immediately be replaced from the appropriate deck. A player cannot draft a card that they've already got, so our player here could not draft another red card, meaning that when it comes back to them, they could draft one of the other 4. And this will continue until every player has the 5 cards they need to start the game. So I'm just going to deal out 2 random sets of starting stuff for my 2 random players that I'm setting up in the game here. I would highly recommend the drafting version for setup because I think it makes the game more interesting. It just means that if you haven't played the game before and you don't know how the cards work, you'll have to have a bit of a primer first so that you know what you're doing. So now everybody's going to get a board and a player baggie, and that's the only difference these make is the guild that you're a part of, and really the only difference that makes is what color you are. So do you want to be purple or red or black or whatever? We're going to play with red and green. It's actually blue. It says blue. It looks like green to me, but I'll let you be the judge. So here are those player baggies I organized earlier. Everyone gets what's in one of those, but don't worry because I'll set that up in a minute for you anyway. Each player now has a player board, their player starting bag, a hero card, and 4 cards that make up their command card starting hand, unless you're doing a draft, in which case you won't have this yet. We've also got now 8 troops, which are the little guys, and 4 golems, which are the big guys. And if you're at this stage of the game, you can also check out who your hero is and grab the mini for that as well. So now here we've got the 2 setup player areas. You'll notice that all the minis have been based in the colored rings. We've got our hero here and our encounter token here. These are about to be deployed on the board, so we don't need to put them anywhere specific. But it is important to note that I've put 6 troops and 3 golems over here to one side, with the other golem and the 2 remaining troops over here on the player board in this area, which is the constructed area, and the troops are ready for deployment. So this is an important distinction. We've also got 4 fortresses over here, which will be deploying during the game. We've got our experience token here and our energy token here on the 0 space of this 12-point tracker. And then we've got our colored cubes up here on the victory point tracker. So now that the player boards are set up, we're going to work out the player order. So we'll take these 5 attunement doodads, and we'll take 1 for each player that we've got in the game. And they are numbered, and that's important. We'll put the remaining ones back in the box. We don't need them. Then we'll just randomize the order, and we'll give each player 1 token. So red's going to be our first player, and green or blue is going to be our second player. And these tokens are flipped over to represent things. They're also going to be turning around during the game. So make sure at the start of the game you've got the colored blue side up and not the discolored gray side. This little splat here is the symbol for energy, and your starting position as player will determine how much energy you start with. So you can go ahead and just modify your energy tracker now. So I've set up a 2-player game here. I'm playing with 2 players. If you remember those Mirage tokens I put out earlier, I'm just going to put them back out now. Now, if we were playing the advanced rules, this is where we'd do the draft for the characters and the starting cards, but we are not. We've just played the basic setup here, so our players already have their champions. So now, starting with player 2, they pick a planet, an island to put their hero down on, and they can pick any space without a Mirage token. So our player here currently quite likes this forest. Then we also take this encounter token here, and we place this on the board, and we can pick any other island on the board that doesn't have our hero on it. So our blue player is going to go down here. You'll notice that each of the islands have a little white circle, and that's just for the encounter tokens. And of course you can have any number of players' encounter tokens in a single space, so they don't block one another. It's just a place to put them that's distinct. So now that the last player is deployed, we'll go back in reverse player order to the first player. But seeing as there's only 2, that's going to be our red player here, who's going to go and put their hero down. And they can go on any island they want, other than the island containing the blue player's champion. So we'll just go ahead and put them out over here. And they're going to go and stick their encounter token also on this island. After everybody's deployed their champions and their encounter tokens, take out the 3 Mirage tokens that are not on islands containing the 2 champions. And with that, we're all set up and ready to start playing the game. So here's the gameplay section of this Mysthea video. Now we've set up the board and everything, and we're all ready to start playing. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, what are we doing here, and how do we win? And that's a good question. So we are, of course, representatives from our different guilds. We've got the Green Guild here, who've sent their hero CR2T1 to conquer these islands. And here's the Red Guild, and they've sent their champion Telron to conquer the islands in the name of the Red Guild. And the way we conquer the islands is by daring do and defeating one another, and if we defeat each other hard enough and accomplish enough feats and destroy enough monsters, then we'll gain enough glory points. And whoever has the most glory at the end of the game is, of course, the winner. And glory points can be accrued by various different things. You can get glory points for defeating your foes in battle. You can gain glory points for moving the islands around. Oh yeah, these islands are going to move. Don't think they're fixed. If they were fixed, they'd just be printed on the board. But no, we're going to be like shifting these puppies all over the place. So that's going to get you glory points too. You're also going to gain glory points for getting troops out on these islands and by controlling regions at the end of an era. These are regions, and during certain phases of the game, all the regions are going to be scored. So you'll be fighting over those, and you'll gain points for fighting. And then you'll be trying to control them, and you'll gain points for that too. And then these little colored discs here that we put out in the setup are your encounter discs. And they allow you to have adventures that come out of this deck. And the adventures are a bit abstract, but they're all worth points. Finally, we've got these 3 monsters here on the event deck, and they're going to come out onto the board, and they're going to be stomping around on the islands, and they're going to attack. And if there aren't enough of us to defeat them, they're going to kill our guys. But if there are enough of us to defeat them, then we're going to get glory for that too. At the end of the game, the player with the most glory points is crowned the captain of the 5 islands and the winner of the new world. And the other guilds have to go home to Kingdom and feel bad about themselves. So the game has 3 eras. So each era is at least 5 rounds long, but chances are it will be longer, 6 or even 7 rounds. but you're never quite sure. It's all about this events deck here. At the end of each era, there's going to be a round of scoring where we score a bunch of glory points for the things we've done in that era. Then some stuff's going to change, things are going to get a bit more difficult, and then we're going to begin a new era with another round of player turns. After each era is the scoring round, and by the end of the third scoring round, the game will end, and whoever has the most glory points is crowned the victor. There's no real endgame scoring, so the same points you get at the end of every era are going to remain consistent, but everything will escalate, so things will get bigger as the game progresses. So the very first thing I'm going to show you is how to begin an era. The beginning of the first era is almost still part of game setup, but you will be doing this at the beginning of every era, so it's important to sort of note. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take these command cards here. We're going to take the deck appropriate for the era, and we note that this is the Era 1 deck, so we're going to give that a shuffle, and we're going to put it here on the command track. Then what we're going to do is we're going to flip over 3 cards off the top, starting with the leftmost spot, and fill up all the shaded cells here on the board with cards. Cool. Then what we're going to do is we're going to grab our Era 1 monster. That's our gentleman here, the Utkoro, and we're going to take this model and put him on the appropriate island. So we can tell the appropriate island because every island has an icon on it. This is the black icon here. So we've got another one down here. Each symbol has one. They link the islands to their attunement cards. You see, all the iconography matches up. And in this case, we can see this is where Utkoro starts. So he's going to come out here onto this island. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take the Utkoro card. We're going to take our events deck here, which is the Storm card and the 5 region cards, and we're going to shuffle him into it. And we're going to give it a really good shuffle. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put the deck down face up so players can see what the top card is. In this case, it's the Forest region card. Now there are a couple of steps we missed here because it's the first era. But if it was Era 2 or 3, we would return any of these attunement cards that had been collected by players, so they'd go back to their spots. And if there was any development cards here on this track, we would take away any left in the deck, as well as any here, to be replaced entirely with the Era 2 deck or 3 deck. And that's the sort of general board admin, but there's also some player admin. So sometimes champions get wounded and they have to lie down, but they don't ever die. However, the only way for your champion to feel better is at the end of an era, where they will stand back up, renewed. Then, what you would do is you would pick up any command cards that you discarded over the course of the first era. So anything in your discard pile here on your player board would return to your hand. Any fortresses that you'd put out on the board would also be collected by you and returned to your player area. Then the next thing we'll do is we'll check the player order. And what I mean by that is let's have a look and see who's got the most glory points. So I've modified this so blue is clearly ahead. So blue would become the first player and red would become the second player. That's very simple in a 2-player game. Let's say we were playing a 3-player game where there was a third player ahead. Then blue and red are tied for second and third, which means that the player order amongst those players would remain the same. Once the player order has been established, we can take our artifacts here and we just make sure that they're on the blue side, the recharged side. So you can see they've got a gray and a blue side, so you make sure that the blue side is showing. And the player with the first player attunement stone will begin the game. So a player's turn consists of 2 things: a standard action and a special action. The standard action involves 3 things. An action called Act, which is a standard action, and that means playing one of these command cards from your hand to the table. The second standard action is Develop, and that means buying more command cards for your hand. Really important. And the third standard action is Meditate, which means generating resources. And when you meditate, you'll gain 3 energy just straight away on your energy track, and then you'll gain resources based on the regions on these islands. Each region produces a different resource. We'll look at Meditate in a bit more detail later on. And you must do one of those 3 standard actions. There are also 4 special actions you can do, and you may do a special action, you may decide not to. The 4 special actions are use an accessory. So, we'll look at these in more detail later, but these green command cards are called accessories. You'll play them down to your board, and they can be activated later for benefits. The second special action is called Attunement, and that will allow you to move around these islands. I don't mean move your champion, but actually move the islands. More on that later. The third special action is Start a Battle. So, in any of the regions that contain your troops and some enemies' troops, and I don't mean little troops in particular, it could be champions, it could be any combination of things, provided there's you and some enemies, you can start a battle. This does not involve fighting the monster. That only happens at very specific times. The last special action is Face an Encounter. If your champion winds up on the island that has their encounter disc on it, then you can spend experience points to have an encounter, which means resolving one of these cards here. So now that we've talked about the 7 possible actions, we'll go through them all in detail. It's just important to remember that you must do 1 standard action and you may do 1 special action. But let's have a look at Act in more detail first. There are 4 kinds of command cards in the game. This red card is called a Tactics card. And we know it's a Tactics card because it's got a red banner with a lightning symbol in it. Tactics cards usually help you in combat or to prepare for combat in some way. Every card has a little command value up in the top corner here, and an ability along the bottom as well. Tactics cards, when they're played during the Act action, will be placed in your discard pile after use. So that card will be discarded once it's resolved. We've got these objective cards, and you know it's an objective card because it's got the glory symbol here in a yellow banner. They typically give you abilities associated with scoring points. And just like the Tactics cards, once you play them and resolve them, they're put in your discard pile. The blue cards are called upgrade cards, and we know they're upgrade cards because of the little flippy symbol here in the blue banner. Now these are a little different to the other 2 in the sense that, unlike the others, you've got a little energy cost here. So you can see that's a little energy symbol with a 2 in it. And at the bottom here, we've got a new special ability. So when we play this card, we can actually spend 2 energy to put it onto our player board. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to look at the little rotatey symbol and match it to one of the 5 upgrade slots on our player board. So these are the upgrade slots, and they actually correspond to the different things in our army. So this corresponds to troops, and you can tell from the little troop face there. This one corresponds to golems, which we know because of the golem head. This one corresponds to our champion, which we know from the champion's helmet. This one corresponds to fortresses, which we know from the little fortress castle symbol here. This last slot here refers to cards, but when we play this upgrade card, we can see that it's got the little golem upgrade, so we know that this is an upgrade for golem. And when we play the card, we can spend 2 energy to place it here on our player board. So long as the card is in this position, this gives all of our golems this special ability here. You'll want to get these slots filled up with upgrades so that you can gain new and special powers and get the most use out of them. At any point you can replace them with a better upgrade, you just put it into your discard pile. This accessory card here is the last type of card, and it's got a green banner and a little set of whirling cogwheels there. And this is basically exactly the same as the upgrade card, but it's an accessory, so it works a little bit differently. But it's got the same energy cost down here, and when we play it, we can have the command points, and we may pay the energy cost to put it on our player board. So you have 3 accessory slots on your player board here, and when you play an accessory, you just put it down into one of the accessory slots here, and that's where it lives, providing you with a bonus ability for the rest of the game. You can swap them out at any time by playing another accessory card and paying the energy cost. But if you replace one, it goes here in the discard. And if you choose not to play the energy cost, it goes here in the discard. So I mentioned a bunch of times that these command cards give you command points. And that's really crucial. So now that we understand a bit more about how the different types work, let's look at an example of playing this objective command card. So if I take the Act action, I'll play this card to the table, I'll gain 2 command points, and I have the option of doing this ability. We'll resolve the command points first. Note that I can do one or both, and I can do them in either order. Command points allow me to do one of 4 things. I can either spend a command point to generate 1 energy immediately. So there's a 1-for-1 ratio, which is not very good. I can also use command points to construct troops. So I can spend 1 command point to take a troop from my supply and put it into the deployment zone on my player board. I could spend 2 command points to do the same with a golem. The third thing I can do with command points is use them to deploy troops from the deployment zone. I can spend 1 to take a troop and put that troop into the region with my champion. I could spend 2 command points to take a golem and do the same. Note that they are always deployed to the region with your champion unless a card allows you to somehow circumvent that. The last thing I can do with command points is travel, which is a fancy way of saying I can move my pieces. A hero can travel 2 regions. Traveling 1 region costs 1 command point. So our champion can spend up to 2 command points to travel 2 regions. So he could go here for 1. If you want to move between islands, then you must travel from between like-for-like regions to adjacent islands. Islands are adjacent when they're next to each other around the circle. So in this case, we're actually looking at this mountain range over here because this crystal one is out of bounds only in this 2-player game. So our champion could actually spend 1 command point to move to this mountain region and then another command point to go over here to this mountain region. Only our champion can do this because he's got 2 movement available to him. Our golem and our troop are only allowed to move once per action. So they could move 1 to here, or he could move 1 to here, and the next time we activate them, the troop could move over here for 1. If you have enough command points, it is possible to deploy a golem or troop as part of an action, and then also to travel with them to another region. So you see, when you're choosing between construct, deploy, and travel, there's a lot to think about. And you've only got 2 command points, there's a lot of choices to make. Fortunately, we'll get more command points in these later decks. But now that we understand how command points work, let's talk about the ability on the bottom of the card. So there's a lot of iconography in this game, and you'll just kind of have to learn it. This black circle up here always means commands, this little set of laurels here always means glory, and this little splat always means energy. And typically, abilities cost energy. This little colon here, that indicates the reward you're getting for the price you spent. So in this case, we have the option of spending 2 energy from our player board in order to gain 3 glory points for every tree region we control. So in this case, we actually control 1 forest region, so we could spend 2 energy for 3 glory points, which isn't bad. It's almost like the blue player deployed in this forest at the beginning of the game deliberately, knowing they were going to play this card. So when we choose to activate this ability, we pay the energy cost here, and then we carry out what it says, and seeing as we've resolved the command points and the ability at the bottom, we discard it into our discard pile here. And don't forget to claim your glory points. So we'll go up to 4 now. And that's an action. So resolve the command points and the ability in either order. You might want to use the command points first to generate energy to then use the ability, but remember that's not very efficient and command points are very important. They get troops on the board, control regions. That's going to be important in a minute, but now we're going to look at the develop action. It's pretty straightforward, and this is how we're going to get those better cards into our hand. The first thing about the develop action that you need to know is that if you're going to develop, you must have at least 1 energy on your energy track on your player board. If you don't have an energy, you can't develop. So the develop action, you're going to approach this deck up here on the top, and you're going to do one of 2 things. The first thing you could do is take the top card of this deck and flip it face up. That's going to give you a choice of 4 cards to choose from, including the 3 you could see. The other thing you can do is if you don't like any of these cards here and don't want them, you can actually choose to take all 3 cards, bury them under the deck, and flip over 3 new cards, giving you an entirely new marketplace to work with. Whether you chose to flip up 1 card for a choice of 4, or reset the marketplace, you now must buy a card. You can buy 1 card for 1 energy. You can buy 2 cards for 3 energy, or 3 cards for 5 energy. And when you've taken the card that you want, you put it into your hand, you pay the energy cost, and that's the whole develop action. Now we're going to just move these down into the leftmost positions and fill in any empty white spaces. That card is in your hand now and available for immediate use. The final standard action we're going to look at is the meditate action. And meditating is pretty straightforward. I'm going to put out some troops now for the purpose of this example. Meditate is all about gaining resources from the board itself. When you meditate, you gain 3 energy. You always gain 3 energy no matter what. Then what you're going to do is you're going to look at your board presence. And you'll gain resources for all of the regions in which you are present. And it doesn't matter if there's any enemies present in those regions. So you'll notice that forests provide more energy. So you can take all of the forests you control and add that energy to the 3 that you automatically get and increase your energy track appropriately. So in this case, we've got 3 energy for taking a meditate, plus 1 for the forest, so we'll go up 4 energy. River regions give you 2 glory points. We'll just immediately add the total number of glory points to our track. So we control 1 river region, so we're going to go up 2 glory points. The Land of Mist gives you 1 experience point, so we'll immediately move our track appropriately. Boop, there's the experience point. A mountainous region allows you to deploy a fortress. So you'll take one of your 4 fortresses and you can put it into any region containing a unit you control. So that's any of the regions with your troops in or the region with your champion. Golems also count as units, but we don't have any. Finally, you've got the crystal region. And the crystal region will give you 1 command point that you can use immediately. And any command points you gain through the meditate action from the crystal regions can only be used for 2 of the 4 command point actions. You can only use them to construct and deploy units. They cannot be used for gaining energy or travel. So those are the 3 standard actions. Now we're going to go into the 4 special actions. And we're going to start actually with the battle action, because the battle action is going to teach us about unit strength. And that's really important to understand because that will tell us how to know when we control a region. The unit strength is actually really easy to calculate. Simply, a troop is worth 1, a golem is worth 2, and your hero is worth 3. If you want to work out whether you control a region, count up the amount of strength you have. If you have more total strength than anyone else's total strength in the region, you control it. Oh yeah, and fortresses provide 2 additional strength. So if you decide you want to battle with another player, you'll have to start a battle. And that's a special action which requires the use of your Attunement Stone. Only 2 actions in the game require you to flip your Attunement Stone, unless it's a special ability on a card, for example. The other one is Attunement, which is about moving the islands, but we'll get to that later. When you flip over the Attunement Stone, you put it on its gray side and keep it in front of you like this. So now that you've activated a battle by flipping your Attunement Stone, we're going to pick 1 region on the board that contains our troops and another player's troops. It might contain up to 3 players' troops, or 4 or 5, depending on how many players there are. There has to be at least 2 people present. So I'm going to set up an example now using 3 players. So here we've got a rather busy forest region that contains troops from the blue, red, and yellow player. So the blue player has spent their Attunement Stone to start a battle. And what we're going to do now is we're going to give every player an opportunity to play a card. These cards are going to have to come from your hand of command cards, and each of the different colors is going to have a different effect. So we're going to have a quick look now at what those effects are. But you remember these player wallets we looked at earlier? What you're going to do is once you've picked the command card you want to play, you're going to hide it in this wallet. Later on, once everyone's chosen their card, we'll reveal the cards we hid in our wallet and what they are. However, it may be that you chose to play no card at all, which is also fine. Now, if you played a red card, you're going to take the command points on the red card and just add them to your army strength. So this is just going to allow you to brute force the battle. If you played a yellow card, you can retreat a number of your units equal to the command points on the card. If you picked a blue card, you're going to gain glory points equal to the command points on the card and a glory point for each unit you have present in the region. If you picked a green card, then you're going to get energy points equal to the command points on the card, plus 1 energy for every unit you have in the battle. And then the outcome of the battle is shorthanded here, but we're going to run through the example now. So here are our 3 players. Now we'll say they're all going to choose a card in secret. Now let's imagine our blue player picked a blue card, our red player picked a green card, and last but not least, that the yellow player picked a yellow card. So first we'll resolve these cards. We'll start by resolving the blue player's card. They're going to gain glory points They're going to get 2 because there's 2 command points on the card, and 2 more because they have 2 units in the region, their champion and this fortress. So they'll go up a total of 4 glory points. Next up, we've got the red player who played a green card. So they're going to get 1 energy, because this has 1 command point on it, plus 1 energy for each unit in the region, which is 3. So they're going to gain 4 energy. Lastly, our yellow player played this card here, which allows them to retreat up to 2 units. And it's 2 units because this has 2 command points on it. And these units could retreat to adjacent islands or adjacent regions. In this case, they're both just going to move to the mountain region here. Note that to move to an adjacent island, they would still have to obey the rule of going to a forest region on an adjacent island. Now that the cards have been resolved, we're going to work out army strength. No one played a red card, so none of them will have an army strength bonus. So we're just looking at the units in the region. The yellow player has a strength of 2. The red player has a strength of 4. 1 for each troop and 2 for the golem. And the blue player has a strength of 5. 3 for their hero and 2 for this fortress. Now each player will take units equal to the difference in their strength scores. So in the case of red, the difference is 1, so the red player will have to lose 1 unit. The yellow player is going to lose both units because the difference is 3. Now, the blue player will gain glory points, 2 for each unit that was killed in battle or removed from the region. Note that if there had been a tie, for example, red had had 1 more troop, then red would have lost nothing, yellow would have lost 2, and both red and blue would receive the resulting glory points because they are tied for maximum strength. It doesn't matter that blue is the one that triggered the battle. It's all about having the maximum strength in order to gain the glory points. Unfortunately, red didn't have that extra soldier, which means they're not going to get any glory. Blue is going to get it all, and blue is going to get 2 for each one that was killed, plus 2 for each one that retreated, giving them a total of 10 glory for this battle. The troops that were removed from the board are put back into the deployment area of their player's board. If you're having a battle, but you have no other units to remove, your hero will take a wound. If you lose a battle and there's another unit that you don't want to remove from the board, you can elect to wound your champion instead. This means the hero lies down, and they are now only strength 1. Champions also have a special ability, which cannot be used while they're wounded. However, any upgrade slots in the champion's upgrade position here on your player board can still be used even if they're wounded. Champions cannot be healed until the end of the era. Some red tactics cards that come in later eras give you the ability to trigger a battle when it's not a special action. So you might play this card as part of an act, and then you could pay 3 energy in order to start a battle, and you'd have plus 3 strength in the battle. So the command cards get a lot more powerful in later regions. You would also get the ability to use 3 command points before you even triggered that battle. So that's pretty cool. The next special action we'll look at is Attunement, which is the other way to use your Attunement stone. So when you attune, you flip over your Attunement stone, and you move the island your champion is on into the middle space of the board here, this crystal. Now you decide where you want the island to go, and you shift the other islands accordingly. So you pick one of the 4 spots. Let's say I wanted to go in here. Now I have a choice. I can either move these 2 around, or I can move these 3 around. So once I've decided what I want to do, I move those 3 around, and I shift this island into the new position. And the world has changed. And of course, as part of the attunement, we check our island's icon here, and we take the appropriate attunement card. In this case, this card here. Each card has a special ability on the bottom, and they all give us points, and those points are scored immediately. So taking this card here will give us 3 glory points for every region we control. In this case, if we are the blue player, we've got like 5 regions or something, so we'll immediately gain 15 glory points. You will then hang on to this card until the end of the era, at which time it will be returned to the track and is claimable again, but nobody can claim it again this era. It's worth noting when you take your attunement card that this is the only attunement card you can take this era. You can only claim 1 attunement card per era. You can take the attunement action again if you want to move the islands around again. However, the second time you take the attunement action, you will not be able to claim a second attunement card. If this is the first time you've taken the attunement action, you can choose not to take a card because you think you might want to do it again later. Don't flip them over because they're different on the other side, and the sides are set during setup and never changed throughout the game. The third type of special action we can do is have an encounter. If our champion ever ends up on the island with our encounter disc, then we can pay experience points to have an encounter. That means you take and resolve one of these cards, and after it's resolved, you put it under your champion like this, so that you know how many encounters you've had over the course of the game. The number of encounters you have had will determine the cost of doing the encounter in experience points. Your first encounter costs 1 experience point, so we'd pay 1 to have our first encounter. Your second encounter will cost 2 experience points, your third will cost 3, and so on, up to 6, at which point you'll have to stop doing encounters and find something else to do with yourself. When you have an encounter, you just take one of these encounter cards and resolve it, and I'll show you how to do that now. So, when you take the encounter card, the very first thing that happens is you immediately gain the glory points in the middle. And then you choose one of these 2 symbols to activate. Each of the symbols has slightly different effects. The boots are for people that want to move around and do moving around things. The chest is for people that want to collect and keep things. The symbols here, the little talkie boxes, are for people that like to negotiate. And the war symbol here is for people that like to fight stuff. But these effects are quite arbitrary and can be quite random. So let's flip over the card and look and see what happens. So if we had chosen the chest, we would get 3 glory points for every crystal region we control. Then our encounter token would move 3 spaces clockwise around the map. If we'd chosen the walk, this means we can deploy a troop and a golem onto the board. Then our encounter token would move 4 spaces clockwise around the islands. Here's an example of a war. So in this case, we could pay 1 energy for 2 glory and an experience point, and then our thing would move around the board. The game tells you that you should choose one of these 2 symbols before you flip it over to find out what you get. But it does say that if you want less randomness in the game, you can just elect at the start of the game to allow players to flip them over and choose the reward they want. So remember, after you've put the encounter card under your hero card, you move this one around an appropriate number of spaces, and now you're going to have to go find it to have another encounter. And that's the have an encounter special action. The final special action is accessories. Use an accessory. So remember those green cards that we looked at in the act step? Well, these green cards are accessory cards. So as part of our act step, we've paid to pin these 2 accessory cards to our player board. And this means as one of our 4 special actions, we now have the option of activating one of these accessory cards. And each one has a different ability on the bottom. If we chose to activate the portal, we could pay 1 energy to move our champion to any region on the board. That's pretty good. With this accessory, we can discard a command card from our hand, and we immediately gain the command points on the card. So we discard this one down here, and then we would take 2 command points, and we could use those to construct a troop or a golem. We could deploy a troop or a golem or move one around on the board. So this is a way to get command points in the special actions phase. The accessories that you choose to pin to your board are essentially a way to develop asymmetrical player powers, and they can be very powerful and very useful. So you really want to think about which ones you're going to put down there on your player board. Of course, you can always discard them to replace them with different ones later. And that's it. We've covered the 7 actions that you can do on your turn. The 3 standard actions and the 4 special actions. Once we've been around the table and everyone's had a go, the first player will take the top card of the event deck and put it over here into this slot. Now we can see the next card that's going to come out, which is Utkoro the Monster. This is going to continue with cards coming out here. It's worth noting that at the end of round 5, when you put out the event card into the 5th slot, everybody's attunement stones will reset if you've spent them. So if your stone is on the gray side here, it will flip back over to the blue side. This will allow you to take an action like the start a battle or attunement action that requires the stone. Of course, if you haven't used your stone yet, then it just remains on the blue side. Until all 5 region cards come out. Now, you may play out all 7 rounds. Or you may find that Utkoro the Monster, or the Storm card, or both, have not come out this round. So you won't really know whether you're going to play 5 rounds or 7. As the game progresses into the 2nd and 3rd era, the other 2 monster cards will be shuffled into this deck. So there could be up to 9 rounds. Once all 5 region cards have been played out, no matter which other cards have been played out, after the 5th region card is put down in the events track here, play 1 final round of turns, and then instead of turning over the next card, activate the end of the era. So now we're going to talk about the end of the era. And the end of the era just has us process this track of event cards, and then we start back at the beginning of the era process. So in this case, we're going to look at the first card in this slot, which happens to be the Forest Region card, which means that everybody who controls a forest region on the board, that's one of these 2 here, this one doesn't count because of our Mirage token, but remember that's just a 2-player game. So they're going to gain glory points equal to this symbol here. So in this case, the red player is going to get 2 glory points. Now this is the Storm card. The Storm card causes the monster to move clockwise. This can make them a bit unpredictable. So you want to keep an eye on these cards as they're coming out during the era. So our Utkoro will move onto this island here, clockwise. Then we're going to do the Land of Mist for 4 points, the Rivers for 5 points, the Crystal Regions for 6 points, and then we get to the Utkoro card. And Utkoro is going to attack. And basically, Utkoro has a war with the whole island, and it's really very simple. All you do is count up the strength of all the units on the island, and then see if they exceed Utkoro's strength. Now this is a bit of a sorry affair. Because of the way my examples turned out, Utkoro is only facing a strength 1 defense. Utkoro has a strength of 10, which means he wins. If Utkoro wins, each player with troops on the island must choose one of the 3 regions and remove all of their troops from that region back to their deployment zone. Note that in this case, blue players only got 1 person, so they'll just remove this one. If the situation was a bit different, red would obviously choose the mist region over the river region. In this example, we can see that there are, in fact, now many more guys. In fact, what we've got is 10 points of strength worth of guys. That's equal to or greater than Utkoro's strength, which means that Utkoro loses. Utkoro is defeated, and players will gain rewards. The player who contributed the most strength, in this case red, will gain the gold reward, and the player who contributed, and so on, silver and bronze. If you're the 4th player and you came in 4th, you will get nothing. So in this case of Utkoro, the player in first position will gain 3 glory points, and then they'll get to have an encounter. So they'll just take and resolve the top card of the encounter deck, and they'll put it under their hero card. Note that in this special situation, no experience points are spent. And then, no matter whether Utkoro was defeated or not, so whether or not Utkoro won the game, the monster will move on to the next island in clockwise order. In the rulebook, there's a section on monsters, and each monster has a special behavior that affects the way they operate. It says that in your first games, you should ignore this behavior as it's quite advanced, but you can implement it in later games to give the monsters a more distinct feel. Obviously in Eras 2 and 3, you'll have more monsters out here to resolve, so you'll have to go through them in order and resolve the rest of them. But now that we've done Utkoro, we do the mountains for 8 points, and then we've actually finished the era. So what we're going to do is we're going to start again from the top. Remember the steps at the beginning of the era I told you about at the beginning of the gameplay section? We're going to do those again. You pretty much know everything you need to know to play Mysthea. Like I said, there's no end game scoring, so all of the scoring that we just went through on this era track, that's all of the stuff that happens at the end. And at the end of the game, whoever has the most is the winner. So I hope that's got you excited and geared up to play Mysthea. I'll be back tomorrow to play Mysthea with Michael and Ollie. We all know Michael loves aggressive territory control games, and so does Ollie, so this should be a blast to see which of us can conquer the 5 islands around the Hero Core. I hope this has really helped you. Thanks so much for watching, and if you have enjoyed this video, or you want to see more like it, or you like our gameplay videos, please do consider subscribing to the channel, because that really helps us to produce this kind of content. And I hope you'll come back tomorrow to join us for our Mysthea adventure. Bye for now!